Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Rust on the Radio on Freedom 95, the John Rust Show, broadcasting at 9:50 a.m. and 95.9 FM on your radio dial, broadcasting all across the beautiful fruited plain and formerly snowy plain, as the snow quickly melts, fortunately, here in central Indiana. Today, folks, we are going to be talking about property tax, and I have three fantastic guests. First of all, Jenee Trimble. Welcome to the show, Jenee.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So I am a former employee and whistleblower from the Monroe County Assessor's Office. Just came forward regarding some fraud and state code violations that I witnessed. And now I'm currently running for a Monroe County Assessor as an independent.
So you worked for the Monroe County Assessor's Office?
Yes. I was in there for 1 year, and then I put my notice in and transferred to the auditor's office.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And so you are an expert on property taxes. Also in the studio today is Indi Hager. Welcome to the show, Indi.
Thank you.
So would you like to introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Yes, lifelong Hoosier. I have been in business doing zoning and permitting for the last 20 years. I'm a paralegal, and I was involved when I was quite young in the promise of 1-2-3 assessment for the state of Indiana.
And we're going to be getting into that in a deep dive in a little bit. So welcome to the show. Also, we have Justin. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be on the show. I think everybody knows me by now, just the old hick from down in the southeast.
From Versailles.
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. So, folks, the big headline, and this was in Indiana Business Journal just last week, Indiana foreclosure activity ranks 7th in the United States. Indiana. Why on earth is Indiana foreclosure rates so high? So I'm going to throw that to you, Jenee. What's your take on that?
Yeah, just Indiana, low wages, but just high cost of living, and just with our tax, the whole entire tax assessment system is corrupt and fraudulent by design.
Well, what I think we have California-style taxes in the state of Indiana, but we don't have California incomes.
Mm-hmm. Major inflation, too. Major inflation on these assessments.
Indi, what's your take on that?
The state of Indiana still sits at $7.25 on minimum wage. And if we don't increase our wages for workers, families aren't going to be able to afford to live, and then they're having to move to the market to be rental versus being homeowners.
Well, and that $7.25, that is worth less and less every year because of the inflation that is just wiping everyone out. And it's the elephant in the room. You know, while Congress, our entire Republican delegation keeps voting for trillions and trillions of dollars of new debt, every dollar of that new debt means of those $7.25 dollars is worth less and less. So, folks, we're talking about property tax assessment in Indiana, specifically how your taxes are assessed. And so Jenee Trimble has a post on this, and I'm going to read just a little bit. It says, prior to 2002, property taxes in Indiana were assessed by true tax value. Can you tell me what true tax value is and why it no longer is the case today?
Yeah, so prior to the 2002 true tax value, it was set at the cost, whatever it was to build your home. They changed that. They wanted to be able every year to inflate those values as the market increased. So they changed the definition of true tax value.
And why did they want to do that? Because they want to increase the taxes you're paying. Not that your house is really going up. In my opinion, I think there's kind of a bubble right now in real estate, but it doesn't really reflect the true cost that you can actually sell your house for if you're out looking today.
Yeah, correct. And the co-creators of the current tax assessment system, if you go back and read all of their old articles, they kept expressing their frustration that commercial was bearing most of the brunt and that they wanted to go after the homeowners. They wanted to be able to tax the homeowners more frequently and for a higher amount.
Well, you know who has a really good idea on how to fix all this is Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. And I want to specifically read this to you folks. It is from Clinton Donnelly on Twitter. It says, I was listening to Ron DeSantis talk about eliminating property tax in Florida, and at first I thought, there's no way that works. And so if you're listening, driving down the road to Freedom 95 right now, you're saying, well, that's fine. He's just another person talking about eliminating something that can't be eliminated. It absolutely, positively can be eliminated, and Ron DeSantis has a plan to do it. This is what Clinton Donnelly had to say. He said, then I heard the details, and it actually made a lot of sense. It would only apply to primary residences and people who live in Florida full time. So if BlackRock's going out buying homes, they would still be paying property tax because that's really a commercial venture on their part. That's not their primary residence, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a great idea.
So businesses and commercial properties, they would still pay. But if you own your home and live there permanently, no more yearly tax just to keep what you've paid for, what you already own. Because in essence, what Indiana is doing with, and this is amazing to me, Florida has no income tax. Indiana has an income tax. Florida is now working to do away with property taxes. We need to be having that discussion here right now. Exactly the same on how Ron DeSantis is proposing it.
One of the things, people panic as soon as there's any kind of a mention of eliminating property tax. Well, immediately they go to, well, how are we going to pay for the schools? How are we going to fund the roads? When I transferred from the assessor to the auditor, I was in the claims department. So I audited every invoice and cut every check. There is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well, and it's going through municipal employees getting higher and higher salaries, more so than what working Hoosiers who have to pay the taxes to pay for the municipal salaries, what they're earning. That is skyrocketing.
Oh, skyrocketing. And the training and travel, ridiculous. Planet Hollywood hotels, Las Vegas, Walt Disney World. I mean, it's outrageous.
You know, it used to be if you worked for the state, in exchange for very good job security, you took a lower wage, but you had a safe job forever. Now you have a safe job, but you get paid way more than market, plus with incredible benefits that people earning $7.25 an hour are having to pay for these school administrators in Indiana that make $300,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. And the school system in Monroe County, while I was in the auditor's office, they cannot make their budgets. 2 different times we had to release funding early because they couldn't even pay their utility bills.
So on what Governor Ron DeSantis is talking about, and he saw this in Sweden, property taxes are actually in Sweden extremely low, and people can actually stay in their homes for their whole life instead of, again, having to pay rent to the government and oftentimes get forced out of the homes that they've lived in all their lives.
When I handled appeals, that's actually one of the things, homeowners that were on Social Security, they would call in and they would state that, you know, we were born and raised here in Monroe County, have lived here our whole lives, worked here, retired here, and I'm going to have to sell my home if my property taxes go up again. And the assessor...
And you live in Monroe County.
Monroe County, born and raised there.
And so, folks, there's a big controversy going on in Monroe County right now with this new annex. I call it an annex. What's it really called? It's called the new jail, new municipal judicial complex. And how much was that going to cost?
Well, now they're talking about the latest article, the latest meeting, $225 million.
$225 million. Folks, in Indiana... I just don't have words for that.
Right.
Marion County just finished up an $890 million justice center.
Yeah, and the one that we have now, it's 40 years old. So I guess every 40 years we're going to have to fit out hundreds of millions for a new one.
Almost $200 million in Monroe County, which is not a very wealthy county, point of fact.
Right.
You know, it's mostly IU, and it's a mostly student population in Monroe County. Is that fair?
Correct. Yeah, fair.
You know, I went to IU, so I'm familiar with. So on a side note on that, they can't even decide where they're going to put that new $200 million building. As I understand it, there's a big fight. They want to build it up by I-69.
It's changed multiple times. They've been fighting for years over the location. And
so, folks, I always say follow the money. You know, in my family business, I watched every dollar being spent, every dollar. For 4 decades, because that tells you the real story on what's happening. What's happening, I'll just be blunt, what's happening on that $200 million being spent for a judicial complex. What they're all fighting about behind the scenes, and the real fight, is who gets a cut of what. Pure and simple. I don't care what anyone says. You know, it's the reason I talk about roundabouts a lot on this show. Roundabouts sound great in theory, but they cost $2 million each. Politicians can take a lot more on the side out of a $2 million roundabout than they can from a company that sells you 4 stop signs for $800.
Right. And it's always a good idea to start to look into who are the contractors, like who are getting the developers, who are getting these big contracts.
And folks, that's why they are pushing your property tax rates higher and higher. They talk about these minuscule adjustments that we got in SB1 last year, but in reality, your property taxes went up a lot last year, way more than what the $300 credit was for most people. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, fair. I mean, everybody, like on average in Monroe County, everyone is going up at least 4%, but most people 10%, 15%. So to say, hey, that's okay because we're going to give you up to a $300 a year credit, which is $25 a month, to offset that, that's a joke. That's laughable.
Well, my issue with SB1, folks, is it was not a conservative bill. It was a Trojan tax bill because it included authorization for every mile of Indiana interstates to now be tolled. And they're doing that right now. They are in the process of trying to toll Indiana Interstate 70 from Terre Haute to Muncie. And it's going to be $10, as I understand it, per car, over $58 for a semi. And so what that's going to do on those semis, folks, they're not going to pay that. They will go to I-64 in southern Indiana and go up through Cincinnati to get to Columbus, Ohio from St. Louis, rather than going through I-70. And then the politicians are going to say, aha, we've lost all that traffic on there, so we got to toll I-64 down. And then it'll be I-65, I-74, I-69. And so eventually every mile of Indiana interstates will be taxed. That is a massive moneymaker for politicians in Indiana. So folks, we're out of time for this segment. When we come back, we're going to get right back into Indiana property taxes. This is John Rust on the Radio. Welcome back, everyone. This is John Rust on the Radio on Freedom 95. The John Rust Show, broadcasting at 9:50 a.m. and 95.9 FM on your radio dial. So, folks, we are talking about property taxes, and during the break, Jenee had a question for Eddie, and I want to get that on the radio.
So I've just noticed on Facebook, I've started following the assessor in St. Joseph's County.
This is, I think, what led to the plan, the promise of the 1-2-3 maximum for taxation on your property started. I think their plan was to slowly reassess people. And then in 2022, it really skyrocketed. Just in Henry County, my hometown, in my home little population of 56,000 people, their assessed value on their property increased $1.5 billion in 4 years.
Folks, that's billion with a B, not
Yeah.
million, billion dollars.
Monroe counties did as well, not this year, but the year before. Assessed values increased by over $1 billion than the year before that.
That's times 92 counties.
Right.
And that was right post-COVID, when COVID drove up home prices astronomically.
Yes, so and they use that as an excuse. So there was a natural boom in the housing market after COVID. But with the way that the tax assessment system is in Indiana, plus the assessors that are corrupt, they piggybacked on top of that. So they
And it got locked
supercharged.
in.
Yes.
And it's locked
Yes.
in, and it's an increase after increase on that, on prices that were not market related, but COVID related. Mm-hmm. And that's not fair to people that are working and just doing their job and making their house payment and trying to pay $10 for a 12-pack of soda, which it is sometimes now, crazily.
Right. With the overinflation, so say someone buys a home, say it's worth $400,000, but they overpay. They pay, especially during COVID. Everybody was sitting at home, everything was locked down. They were getting that extra $900 a week on unemployment. So everybody was just really, the TikTok videos were flying with the renovation. So everybody was out to just get a home and remodel and renovate. By the time you would go look at a house, by the time you made it home, you couldn't even put an offer in because somebody would get it. So everyone was overpaying. So the assessors would say, oh, well, that's market value though. You paid that, you set the value. when a house sells for way less than it should, the assessors will filter those sales out and say, well, that was made in duress. We had it assessed for $300,000. You had to move to Florida to take a new job. You dropped it $50,000 really quick. That's under duress. We're taking it out. But they don't take out the sales overpay under duress. Same reason. I have to move to Indiana. I start a job in 30 days. I can't find a home. This one's overpriced $50,000, but I need a house. I'm going to pay it. Well, they'll leave those in. They'll say, oh, market value.
They also use the annual adjusted factor calculations.
The trending.
We've never been able to get a true definition of the annual adjustment factor.
So market is not market at all.
At all. It's
And
it's
that's the
very
sad part.
manipulated.
People ask me, I'm a free market capitalist.
Right.
I just 100% believe in the power of the free market. It's what my family's business thrived on. When my dad started selling eggs on the Indianapolis farmers market in the late 1940s, he was getting over 50 cents a dozen. Adjusted for inflation today, that's over $7 now
Yeah.
a dozen. Wholesale. The retail price would have been, adjusted for inflation, $12 a dozen.
Wow.
Egg prices have, went up a lot because of avian influenza. And unfortunately, folks, a little side note here on the way driving up to the studio today. There are sandhill cranes everywhere in Jackson County, and that's how we got our avian influenza. The last time I got to use chicken farmers call avian influenza AI. It's not artificial intelligence. Chicken farmers do not use artificial intelligence because you still have to have a real chicken, fortunately, laying a real egg. So I don't think artificial intelligence will be very useful
Robotic chicken
for chicken farmers. But the power of the market has pushed egg prices down to, I think today we're getting about $1 after everything said and done. We're getting about $1 a dozen today. It costs us almost $2 a dozen to produce eggs, but that's okay. That's the free market. Sometimes we make money, sometimes we don't. Over time, we make a living. We're farmers. It's a low return on investment long term, but that's okay. That's what we do, and that's what we love doing because the market keeps us honest. We can't have exorbitant costs because we can't pass those costs on to the consumer. The market decides what we get for egg prices, not us. We are 100% market takers, not market makers. Jenee brought up a key point on real estate prices. The assessors are market makers. They are deciding what the price is that your home is worth by throwing out the low prices they don't like. So that means you're not having a free market actually decide what your taxes should be fairly.
That market also needs to be fair and equal as well and applied equally. In the state of Indiana, and I've noticed mainly in Marion County, that Marion County has favored corporate America. And I'll just give an example and not pick on a specific name, but the gas stations that are being built on nearly every corner. There's a gas station that was built. It cost them $1.9 million to build that gas station. They paid $10 million for the lot. To this day, it's being assessed at $700,000. It's not even being assessed at a third of, not even 3% of what it actually should be assessed at. If the state of Indiana and Marion County would say commercial property has to be assessed at the same time residential property has to be assessed, fair and equal. If you're in the neighborhood and everybody else is increasing 25 to 40% increase, the commercial property should have to face the same increase.
Jenee was talking about that as well, where these assessors really are picking winners and losers in their local economy. And I just find that abhorrent. I don't like that at all. I believe in the power of the free market. The beefs I have with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, that's used by the bigwigs to pick winners and losers. If you have a great idea and you're starting out in your garage in Indiana somewhere with, the next best wonderful thing, you may not be able to build that in Indiana if the IEDC decides, we're going to put XYZ company next to you and they're going to build it and they get all the tax benefits and they get, tax abatements for 30 years and you don't. It's someone picking a winner and loser. I say let the free market work that out. That's how my family's business survived and thrived in the long run. It was always a fight for what we were doing in the egg business to have lower cost eggs for consumers. We continually built new chicken farms that were larger and larger that had lower cost of production. That's how we were able to stay in business, pure and simple. So when my dad started selling eggs on the Indianapolis farmers market in 1948, he was getting 50 cents a dozen back then. And again, like I said, that's $7 a dozen today. Today we're getting way less than that because of the power of the free market, the power of these large, efficient farms producing eggs that grocery stores can now buy for much cheaper prices.
Yeah, the same thing happened in Monroe County with the commercial. They had just started taking a look at the commercial land, and the homeowners, residential's hit hard every single year, and that you're not slipping through. One of the projects that I worked on before I left the assessor's office, I pulled all of the commercial neighborhoods in the entire county, and I marked on there like the last time that they had a change to the land value. And there were so many, they hadn't even been increased since like 2012, 2015.
Way below market.
Way below market. But yet the homeowner, it's every year.
Well, and the reason that they hit the homeowners, there's a 6-step process to go through for an appeal. And the very first thing it tells you in the instructions is you may want to contact an attorney.
When they would call in for their appeals, we were trained to manipulate the taxpayer to just accept whatever just
6-step process. And
get them to accept it. And they don't know their rights.
They have to fill out Form 130 by June 15th. And if they don't, that's a deadline.
And you get this bill, and you're like, well, that's wrong. I'm going to go fight it. And they throw such a mountain against you, you give up.
Get an attorney.
And those are the people that even try to fight it. I think really most people are just like, well, we're in a red state. Our property taxes are probably lower than every other state. Wrong.
Right.
And so they just think because we have Republican governor, we have a Republican supermajority in the Indiana legislature, that things are being taken care of by economic conservatives. Sadly, folks, there are no economic conservatives.
Right.
I saw a post on Twitter the other day. They said Indiana is the bluest red state, and I thought that was I thought they hit the nail on the head because
accurate.
Our elected GOP, they govern like Democrats.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what's happening on property taxes. And I just can't believe we are going down the toll road option here in Indiana. That's just mind-boggling to me. And what I especially don't like on the gas tax, we're the 4th highest gasoline tax in the country. The revenue is pouring in. There is record gasoline tax revenue today, folks, more than there ever has been. But they're all saying, oh, there's not enough. Where is all that money going? If you look at the roads, you wonder where that money went because our roads are awful. I'm sorry, I do a lot of driving between the various states because my family have farms in Iowa, Missouri. Their roads are awesome compared to ours, and they have much lower gasoline taxes and no tolls. What on earth is Indiana doing with all that gasoline tax money?
So if you take away the ability for the consumer to travel on a road to go to the market where the consumable items are.
Well, it's just the Indiana establishment GOP. And I always say establishment because the grassroots is 100% against this. 100%. Mm-hmm. I think we are 100% against tolls across the board. I have never heard of any Republican at a Lincoln Day dinner that I've met say, oh, I really think we should be paying a toll in addition to that 4th highest gasoline tax. Is your Ring camera on your door, folks, may be charging you a toll to enter your doorway sometime to go into your house. I think the Indiana legislature may be working on a way to do that sometime.
I'll just stay home.
But I think that's coming.
Oh, I wouldn't be
and
surprised.
it's happening in Indiana. Look at what they're doing with the speed cameras. They're called flock cameras.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And folks, yes, it's about getting you speeding, because they want to get you a speeding ticket for going a mile over the speed limit or whatever their threshold is. The real reason they're doing that is they want to track how many miles you're driving. Those flock cameras track your license plate with an eagle eye. Every Indiana state driver's license plate is ultra readable by these flock cameras. And folks, the reason those cameras are going in addition to the tolls, in addition to the gasoline taxes, California is now working on a mileage tax So they want to track how many miles you are driving, and they're doing that the same way with the flock cameras. So to my mind, that's Indiana just preparing for a fourth or fifth tax on you driving to work, because you're paying a local wheel tax, you're paying a sales tax on the car you buy, you're paying a gasoline tax, you're paying a toll. Someday there will be a mileage tax. You know, it is just...
Can you tax a horse?
Do they tax the Amish buggies? Are they registered?
Wheel tax.
We're going to talk about that. Folks, we're out of time on this segment. When we come back, we're going to talk about more on these mileage taxes and what's going on in Monroe County. This is John Rust on Rust on the Radio. We will be right back. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM, the right station for talk. So on the John Rust Show today, we're talking about property taxes and the goals of the Indiana establishment, politicians on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, on restricting your liberty. And I'm going to have a whole show on this coming up very soon, this Indiana war on cars, this Indiana war on individual car ownership. So Jenee, right before the break, we were talking about these districts in Bloomington. Do you want to go more into that?
And this leads into the waste and abuse, taxpayer dollars. So Monroe County, they currently have a project called the Hopewell District, which is like it's a 15-minute city model. But they want to dissuade people from driving automobiles, so they're taking out the parking spaces. 2 years ago, while I was still there, they took out, around the courthouse square, they took out 4 parking spots and extended the sidewalks. Well, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to extend the flower beds, to extend the sidewalks, to pour all that concrete to just take out 4 more spaces.
They don't want cars at all. And I saw This is the same on Kirkwood Avenue where they banned cars.
They closed Kirkwood Avenue down. Which is like a landmark for Bloomington and especially for IU students. But yeah, so they closed Kirkwood.
So how do you get to Nix now?
You're walking. You're walking.
From very far on a cold winter day, that ain't going to be very fun.
No. Yeah, and they pay incentives to county employees to encourage you. If you ride your bike versus drive your automobile, we're going to give you a bonus. If you carpool, we're going to give you a bonus.
But it's no different in Indianapolis, and it's no different statewide with the tolls. If you toll something, that means you want to stop that activity, pure and simple. They want you on bicycles, and I know that sounds, to me it sounds ludicrous and crazy that the Indiana establishment doesn't want people driving in their cars. Instead, they want you on buses, on trains,
right,
on your bicycle, or walking.
My horse.
Or golf cart.
Or golf cart.
Or golf cart.
Yeah, like I said, down in Madison, they've got bike lanes. They've got lanes on some of the main streets that say, "Oh, you got to share the road with the bicycles and golf carts," and that's just dangerous. Having bicycles, golf carts, and motor vehicles on the same road. And Madison has a Republican mayor, by the way, and almost everything about Madison is Republican in quotes because they don't govern like Republicans.
Well, they're really Democrats. They're 1980s Democrats. Someone said, the Indiana Republican Party is the 1990s Democratic Party. Well, actually, Bill Clinton passed a balanced budget in the 1990s. A lot of people don't remember that, but he did. Look at how many trillions and trillions of dollars Jim Banks and Todd Young and every member of the Indiana House delegation has voted for over the last year.
I don't feel like there's Republican, Democrat anymore. I just feel like it's us and them.
Well, it's the government against you folks.
Yes.
Winners and losers.
And this is from Dan Butters on Twitter. He says, Illinois representatives want to grant a 5% homestead property tax exemption discount for municipal employees. So folks in the state of Illinois, they're working on making government employees where they won't have to pay their property taxes, but the taxpayers will still have to pay the income tax. They will still have to pay the sales tax. They'll still have to pay the property tax. They'll still have to pay the tolls. But they're working on plans so that your elected leaders, they're drawing a big salary, but they don't have to pay the taxes you and I have to pay. Where's the fairness in that? We all just want an equal playing field.
Right.
You know, if you want to go out and be an egg farmer and compete against my family's business, wonderful. It's 100% free market. You should absolutely 3,000% be able to go out and start your own chicken farm. And they're doing that now in Jackson County. There are farmers building new chicken houses, and that is awesome. That is wonderful. That's the power of the free market. That's wonderful. That is making Indiana a food producer for the world. Instead, Indiana now, the big thing, and it ties back to property taxes, folks, is these data centers.
Data centers.
All the elected politicians want these data centers to drive up your property taxes even higher. And you're thinking, you scratch your head, why on earth is the Indiana political establishment in both parties pushing these data centers? You know, especially the Republicans. I think it's the wrong thing to do. You know, I have billboards up across the state now saying no to data centers. So, folks, if you're driving down I-65, you're going to see John Russ saying no to data centers. And here's why. It is purely a ploy to raise your property taxes. Purely, 100%. These data centers get tax breaks and abatements you will never see. And who owns these data centers? The Mark Zuckerbergs of Meta and Bezos of Amazon. You know, these guys are nearly trillionaires. And Indiana is bending over so that you and I have to pay their taxes. You and I have to pay their electric bills.
Yes.
I think it kind of goes along with what Jenee said about us versus them, because John, you mentioned that it's the establishment of both parties that want the data centers. Well, the grassroots of both parties don't want the data centers. Like, they want to put one over by Brookville in Franklin County, close to where I'm at, and both the Republicans and the Democrats of the grassroots have been rallying really hard against the data center.
Yeah.
So again, I think it goes perfect with what Jenee said. It's, you know, the grassroots against the establishment. Yeah.
And folks, the reason they're pushing the data centers, they want anything they can do incrementally to increase your property taxes. And so by having these high dollar data centers go in, they can raise the residential tax rates. That is the entire ball game. And where it relates to energy use, Indiana was in the past a lower cost electric state in comparison to other states. Sadly, because of all these data centers and because these windmills and solar farms, our electric rates in Indiana now, folks, is 17 cents per kilowatt. This next figure will shock you. Kentucky, which still burns mostly coal for their power, is 12 cents per kilowatt.
NIPSCO's promised they're going to drive that cost down.
I'll believe it when I see it.
I will too.
No, they're not, folks. You know, if you look at the salaries on all these public utilities, they will blow you away. We're going to have an expose on this in a coming episode where we're going to talk specifically just about energy prices in Indiana. But what's happened is all these power companies in the state, again, they are regulated by the state of Indiana. Every dollar they charge you has to be approved by the political establishment here in Indiana.
Well,
every penny.
That's the game they're sold you. AES had a $124 million profit last year. Their CEO took a $14 million bonus while they're begging and pleading and threatening consumers.
And that's a public utility. You know, and if they were doing a decent job and had low kilowatt per hour rates, fantastic. Sadly, we're having to pay these exorbitant salaries for horrible performance based on what we're having to pay for electricity today.
You know, John, you've mentioned many times that the elected establishment in Indiana has fallen hook, line, and sinker for the Green New Scam, and now they've got this war on coal, and that's why Kentucky is so much better, because again, they still burn coal.
Well, folks, I always say follow the money. Again, I look at everything through dollar signs.
Yeah.
Wind and solar didn't drive down the cost either.
And on all these LED light bulbs, how much has your power bill dropped after you installed all these LED light bulbs? Folks, again, it's always about the money. And these utility executives, their bonuses are based on how much revenue they are bringing in, not how inexpensive the electricity they are producing costs, but how much revenue is coming in. So they are keyed in financially. They are incentivized financially to have higher and higher utility rates. These people, folks, are the ones paying off the politicians through the campaign donations. Just look at who AES donates to. It is a who's who of the GOP establishment in Indiana. It's always follow the money. We use this analogy in Washington that Washington is spending like drunken sailors. But, Ronald Reagan always said, well, at least the drunken sailors were spending their own money, so more power to them. Yeah. The difference is the politicians are spending your money and your kids' money and your children's children's money through these massive government debts. And folks, it's right here in Indiana too. This came across on Twitter the other day. This is from Indi Reporter. Fort Wayne Community Schools are spending over $500,000 on cell phone bags. So folks, you may be like me. You're like, what's a cell phone bag? The cell phone bag is used to stop the signal from your cell phone from working. And so if you go to a concert, they will impound your cell phone, stick it in a bag, lock it up, and you don't get it until after you're out of the concert. I guess they're going to be doing that the same with kids. I'm sorry, the common sense Hoosier farmer solution would be, sorry, no cell phones allowed in school.
It's easy to do. Just say no cell phones.
Just say no cell phones in school rather than spending $500,000. And so, folks, and this is the sad reality on this, there will be a vice president in charge of cell phone confiscations at school for each school that will probably make $150,000 or $300,000 a year. Who knows what?
Cell phone czar.
That puts the cell phones in these protective bags. I hate doing this, but someone will be getting a big cut of that $500,000 for those bags. Pure and simple.
Guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this is all about. And that's why these career politicians protect each other. Not all career politicians are on the take. But what I found, being an observer of Indiana politics, a lot of the politicians are pure as wind-driven snow. But they know where the bodies are buried. And they use that leverage to get laws they want passed for whatever reason. And so there's a lot of career politicians in the state of Indiana that have a lot of shady dealings that people know about, but it's never reported and never talked about, because then they can use that leverage on that person to get something they want down the road.
Mm-hmm. So, the ones that really have integrity and want to do the right thing and they're about change, at least from what I've seen this past year, they get pushed to the outskirts.
Yeah, they'll last a term or two.
Mm-hmm.
We have a great example in the studio with us right now.
You're out. You are not in the circle anymore.
Oh, John, you had them so stirred up that I think you literally rusted their heels. They were so scared of you.
Well, they're scared of anyone that's normal, anyone that's decent, anyone that is not bought and paid for.
That last part right there.
17 Lincoln dinners that you went to, and everybody come over and goes, oh, no. And I was like, why? We need to listen to him. We need to hear what he has to say. I think he's got a good message.
They're scared of someone speaking the truth and shaming the devil. Mm-hmm. And, pure and simple, in Indiana, the GOP establishment is purely the party of government. It is not a conservative party. It is not a party of ideals. It is purely the party of government. That's why I'm working hard to make it the GOP, which I believe in. I'm a Reagan Republican. I believe in limited government. And Donald Trump, he said this himself. He says any member of Congress that voted for deficit spending should not be reelected. Mm-hmm. Sadly, all that advice is just being thrown out the window right now. And it's the same here in Indiana with all these taxes and tolls. When we come back, we're going to talk about BlackRock and Blackstone, who are buying up homes and causing your property taxes to go higher and higher. This is John Rust on the Radio. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on the Radio, Freedom 95, the right station for talk, broadcasting at 9:50 a.m. and 95.9 FM on your radio dial, broadcasting all across the beautiful fruited plain, and I love using that expression from Rush Limbaugh, of our beautiful state of Indiana. Gosh, I miss Rush Limbaugh so much.
Sure do.
I was going to say, I miss him.
He'd tell you the truth and share a cigar.
Exactly. He always spoke the truth and shamed the devil, and he didn't care who you were. He spoke the truth on every politician, from Donald Trump all the way down. He always did that. Like Lindsey Grahamnesty, who a lot of Republicans think should be reelected. I think we need conservatives in there, not people pushing for amnesty. Back on point for this show, we're talking about property taxes, and I want to ask Eddie Hager here. Let's get into local malls. What's going on with that in terms of true tax value? And can you explain to folks what true tax value is? And also, you said something about 1, 2, 3 earlier. What specifically is that, and how does that relate?
Back in 2008, they passed the 123 promise to the property tax payers of Indiana, and you were going to be assessed at only 1%, 2%, and 3% accordingly to your type of property. That was their promise. What they took out was the assessed value elimination. Once you were assessed, there was a 10-year hold. You didn't get reassessed for 10 years if you maintained that property and the ownership of that property. They took that away, so now you could be reassessed every year.
See, in my opinion, if you are going to have property tax, I think it should be based on the actual price you paid going forward forever, so that you can budget that when you buy the property. Because what happens, folks, is you may buy your dream home, and the property may increase in value more than you ever planned because your neighbor went in next door and built in a big McMansion and pushed the price up through no fault of your own. I think your home is your castle, and at the very minimum, it should only be taxed at the rate that you actually physically paid for the property. But in the end now, because of how the system is so totally flummoxed now, I think we have to eliminate property taxes entirely for homeowners.
In the state of Indiana, it's required that you have a sales disclosure form that you have to fill out. That's by law. But if you go to the treasurer, guess who is not required to collect that? And when you go to file your paperwork where you have bought a home to the recorder is not required to make sure that you have that sales disclosure form. There was a commercial property we were doing research on, and there was 12 parcels involved. Of those 12 parcels, and they had all sold over the years, only 2 of those had sales disclosure forms with them to disclose the true cost of those when they sold. So Indiana, even though they have it in place, they're not using it.
So, folks, it's like when you see the example of Lady Justice with the weights hanging in her hand on each. What they're doing is they're putting their finger on the scale and they are jamming it to the ground to say your rates are going to be this. That's what we think you should be paying, not on any real price that you actually paid.
Yes. And within reference to the shopping centers, in Marion County alone, they are decreasing in value on assessment to the tune of 50 to 60% value. Some of them are even more so, and they completely destroyed the assessed value of Circle Center Mall. So when it sold and they redeveloped it, they would have a 4 to 5 year reprieve on paying the actual real value of that property. Mm-hmm. That's game to play, picking winners and losers.
And that's just not right.
Nope.
I don't care what anyone says. The government should be equal for everyone. If you're out working, you're paying taxes. You are entitled to fairness. And that's not happening now because these politicians, these assessors are saying, oh, you're going to pay this, you're going to pay that. Your house values really have no relation to what you paid because that was the plan all along. And then they used COVID, like we talked about earlier, to push property values up even higher. And that's why, folks, Indiana's foreclosure activity now is 7th highest in the country. We live in California now. We're supposed to be in a ruby red state of Indiana. What on earth is going on?
Well, John, I think it all goes back to what you said before. The government wants to be the ones who pick the winners and the losers.
And so true assessed value is not the true assessed value.
No.
It is the true opinion value of the assessor based on what the powers that be for that person higher up.
Well, this is what was going on down in my home county. Our assessor was doing that exact same thing, having the state tell her what to say the property was, and a man tried to run against her, and he was slandered. They said he was all this and that. Unfortunately, he lost, but that's exactly what's going on, even in a small county like Ripley, is the state tells the people how it's going to be.
Well, the state has, of course, a vested interest in making sure that you pay more and more in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
It was a go-around for the 123 law.
Well, and I know that IEDC, part of their money comes from the property taxes, but is that through the TIFs and...
They control the TIF dollars and how those TIF dollars are spent, and those are all, they're not elected, they're appointed.
Right. Do you want to go on, Eddie, a little bit on what TIFs are? Tax
increment financing.
Yes.
So the LEAP project is a TIF district, so they're going to spend billions and billions of dollars in the LEAP project north of Indianapolis. $500 million of our tax dollars to expand the LEAP district.
The TIFs is actually, it's a mortgage on future taxes.
Yes.
It's not actual money coming in today. It's going to be this.
We call it ghost tax.
And so my issue with all that, and amongst 1,000 other issues with it, from obviously picking winners and losers, is will this money actually ever come? If there's a downturn in the economy, who's going to get stuck with all these bills for all of this? You, the Indiana taxpayer, will. It's going to go on your back. It's certainly not going to go on Mark Zuckerberg's back for a data center somewhere that's getting a big tax break. You that live in the state of Indiana will be the ones paying for it.
We have 78 TIF districts in Indiana.
Almost as many counties.
Like you touching on the abatements, like in Monroe County, millions of dollars, like per corporation, is given to these companies. And the assessor, they will never hold them to the term of the abatements.
Well, it's a
Every
Ponzi
year.
scheme.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna provide 200 jobs, and
It's a tax shift.
yeah,
It's a tax Ponzi scheme.
they'll break it, and they're never bound to those terms ever.
There was a corporation in Henry County that was an automobile manufacturer that left Henry County owing the county $25.7 million in taxes because it never met its employment requirement. The lawyer for the county, who was the lawyer for the manufacturer, failed to file the appeal when they filed bankruptcy, and the property was sold. $200 million factory was sold for $1.5 million, and the county lost out. They never got their $25 million.
And so who has to pay for it? The taxpayers of
Yes.
that county. Because someone has to pay the bills. These career politicians, it's always someone else in the future, will be paying for all their mistakes over and over and over.
It's not just in Ripley County. It's not
It's
just
in
in Marion
every
County.
county.
It's not just
Yeah.
in Monroe County.
In my own county of Jackson
It's-
County, we did the fancy jail as well, and a small county jail to a massive county jail. And we just had this huge scandal where the county's having to pay over $2 million in Jackson County, and it's all being swept under the rug where a prisoner was allowed to die in the county jail. And so the county, i.e. the county taxpayers, are having to pay for that ineptness. So, folks, we're out of time, but I want to thank Jenee so much for coming in. Thank you, Jenee Trimble, again for coming in.
Thank you so much. I love being here. It was a great conversation today, and I appreciate it.
And we'll do it again. And Eddie Hager, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Let's get the word out.
Absolutely. And Justin, thank you.
Absolutely, like you always say, speak the truth and shame the devil.
And on that note, I'm going to close with my father's favorite Bible verse, Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Folks, this is John Rest. I will see you all again next week on the radio.